Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Everybody's wearing black today.
I have a little bit
Blue.
of color on.
Blue.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, on the video, it looks all black to me. Great, I think it's 8:15. And let's call the Whatcom County Public Utility District Number 1 meeting to order. And also say that I was planning to attend in person, but I had a kind of a coughing thing going on, and I thought that I didn't want to expose Christine to any more germs with her young ones.
I'm getting plenty for my children every day. Thank you.
Not that anybody else was. I recall you talked about how many bugs you've been on the receiving end of. So anyway, yeah, let's call the meeting to order. And the first thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
We got to work on that.
So, okay, so first thing, let's go over our agenda today. So, are there any modifications or revisions to the agenda?
Commissioner, we have a resolution recognizing an employee. I'd like to have that as the first item of business before we do anything else. That's the only change I recommend to the agenda.
Great, yeah, let's do that. Any,
Oh, we're gonna do it right now, not under new business.
sure, yeah,
Oh, okay. We're just adding it to the agenda. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of resolution 837.
A second.
As a motion, a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so yeah, let's do that. Chris, go ahead.
Well, Commissioner Grant moved that it be under new business, which is where we have it on a revised agenda. So it'll wait till then.
Oh, okay. All right, great. All right, well, let's move on then to the consent agenda, which is the minutes of our last regular meeting and the claims for today.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A second.
There's a motion, a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then let's move on to public comment. Any comments in the room?
None here.
Okay, let's see online here. I don't see any hands up. There is a second public comment period at the end. So I'll go ahead and close the public comment for this portion of the meeting. So let's move on to the general manager's report. Chris, please go ahead.
Yeah, just really briefly, a lot going on with regards to geothermal. I don't know how much we want to go into that right now, other than we've gone ahead and signed the checks and submitted all the paperwork for nominating the lands for public auction. So we're going to wait to see what happens there. And then there's just a ton of information and a lot of learning going on right now. So I want to hold off. I've got a lot to say on broadband and other things that have been occupying me. So I want to hold off on that part of my report. I don't have any trouble.
Chris, are we planning to talk about geothermal more later in the agenda today?
Really wasn't planning on it, Commissioner.
Well, I just thought it'd be helpful to let the public know that, you and Christine are presenting at the Climate Impact Advisory Committee on Thursday.
I was gonna mention that in my commissioner report.
Okay, and then, in addition to that, just mentioning that, I was listening to, some podcasts that were talking about the, global warming impact potential associated with geothermal. So, I was reminded that there is a global warming impact potential associated with geothermal, that may not be trivial, and because both sulfur dioxide and CO2 can be emitted from conventional geothermal extraction, and potentially because it's still a new area with enhanced geothermal, is something that has to be assessed. Any form of drilling can release gases as well. So something for us to be aware of and think about.
Yep, that's on my mind, and I think Chris, yeah, knows about it too.
Oh, yeah.
I'll mention more during my commission report about things I've been up to.
Great.
Did you want to introduce Stephanie?
Yeah,
Okay.
she's met everybody.
Okay.
So we're good.
And we can do that in under new business as well, when we talk about Tracy as well. So, okay, let's move. If there's nothing else under general manager's report, let's move on to old business. So the first.
So on
the
broadband.
Okay. Sorry, go, Chris.
Yeah, so last week, volume 2 of the state's proposed broadband submittal came out, and it's available for comment. And it's worthy of us going through. So I asked Andrew to put together a little PowerPoint on it, and the two of us kind of want to walk you through that and what's going on. So
Please proceed.
So the agenda you can see before you, and by the way, we'll post this on the website when we're done with the meeting here. So what we want to talk about today is the overview of the BEAD program. And then the state has a 2-stage response, and it's called Volume 1, Volume 2. And I'll go over a reminder of what was in Volume 1, which was pretty non-controversial and pretty happy with it, didn't make any comments. Volume 2 is what we want to spend our time on today. And then possibly talk about policy recommendations and certainly next steps. So the whole program was part of the IRA, and the philosophy behind it, as articulated by the Biden administration, was it's time to get broadband to every American. And allocated to that was about $42 billion, and recognize that I think everybody who looks at this realizes that that's not enough, that the 1.23 billion that was allocated to Washington State is not enough for Washington State. But it's a big step forward, and it would be probably 80 or 90% of our unserved customers if it's done right, and really a big help. One of the keys, and we've worked on this for the last year and a half, and Andrew's been one of the leading proponents in the state on it, was to transition from the census block data, which was a very broad shotgun type measure of who's served and not served and underserved, and go to an address by address form of data, which is called the FCC Fabric. And based on what was in the Fabric, that's how the 1.23 billion was allocated. So we know the Fabric's not perfect, but we also know that that in most places it's not bad. So it was one of those things where, you could argue every single address, and some people wanted to do that, but on average it worked out. And so that's why we kind of left everything the way it was. One requirement of
Chris, on that, would you say that that it's an order of magnitude improvement over the census block in terms of identifying unserved and underserved?
Well, it's 3 orders of magnitude at least more precise. And so, you know, the census block, you could go down to 1,000 households or so on a census block, and then the whole census block was either served or unserved. In this case, we're looking at every single address in that census block, which if it's 1,000, that's 3 orders of magnitude. So the BEAD program, after the 1.23 billion was allocated to Washington State, like all the other states, Washington State has to submit a plan. Here's what we're going to do with that, and it had to conform to the NTIA requirements that came from the federal government, and then the final response had to be negotiated before any funds get sent to us. So we expect the state will receive funding sometime next year, and we think that's about how long it'll be. So the state, they did a lot of stuff. I mean, and you guys know we've been working on this for quite a while. And Andrew has done yeoman's work on it, as has Gina Stark from the port. The fabric data was kind of clarified and used, and then validated. And then each county needed to put together a digital equity plan, and that was submitted to the state, rolled up to the state digital equity plan. That was all part of it. And then the state took the digital equity plan, the allocations, the fabric data, all that, and then they said, all right, we're going to respond in 2 different tranches because they're really kind of different issues. So the first issue was largely, how are we going to go through a challenge process? Because our last round of grants, that was a problem. And the challenge process was not smooth. It was not without controversy, and it ended up with some outcomes that were just screwy, and everybody recognized that. So the volume 1 dealt a lot with the challenge. And Andrew, could you advance the slide? Yeah. So that came out for comment on October 1st. I read the whole thing. It was really non-controversial. There's nothing in there that I would recommend that we comment on. In other words, it was okay. You could nitpick anything, but it was okay. PUD submitted some comments. It wasn't really voluminous from them either, and they really were into correcting language and doing things like that.
Well, let me just stop on the challenge process for a minute, Chris. I just want to confirm that all the PUD community and our PUD challenge process, and that was to shift the balance towards publics and put additional burden on those that challenge. And I recall one of the most aggressive ideas was that once any entity challenges, that they have the responsibility to serve if they prevail in the challenge. So I don't remember if that got adopted, but what's your feeling on whether the wants of the public utility community were addressed in the new challenge process?
Well, I think that we weren't looking to put our thumb on the scales or, tip the plane or anything. We were just looking for fairness. We were looking for the ability to, when somebody challenged you, that they had to prove it, that there was a very short period of time to prove it, and that there were consequences if it wasn't proved out. And I think that the proposed challenge process in volume 1 fit that basic requirement. Andrew, I'll defer to you. You remember?
Yeah, and I would like to
detail.
get a reminder. What is the consequence, if you don't mind?
Well, I think it would just be reject the challenge and move forward with the award. And that wasn't the consequence in the last round. In the last round, they set everything aside and then they adjudicated it after all the money had been given away, so that if you won, it didn't matter. So in this case, yeah, it was, I mean, the challenge process that they've come up with, I think, was fair and balanced. And that's really what we were looking for, was just some fairness in the thing.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Andrew, do you want to chime in on that?
I think we hit it. So what will happen is the state will develop a master list of all the unserved and underserved areas in the state, and that will go out for review. And so we'll have another option to look at whether or not an address is served or not served based on the state's data and all the work that NOAANET did, looking at the unserved and underserved in the state. The state broadband director had originally looking at all those numbers, had anticipated about 900 million coming to the state, but through the good work of NOAANet, they were able to identify, thousands of actually unserved address points that were previously not identified, and those were accepted by NTIA, and that increased the state's allocation from 900 million, which we thought we were going to get, to the 1.23. So there's a lot of good work that's already been done on that front, but we will still have another process once the challenge process is initiated next year.
Okay, next slide. So the volume 2 came out last week, and I was not expecting any kind of real turbulence. Comments are due at the end of this month. And we started to hear rumblings, and so this came out early last week, and I read it Tuesday and Wednesday, and we formulated this little overview for you guys. So the rest of this presentation is going to be about what's in volume 2. So the purpose of volume 2 is to determine, when the broadband office comes out with a notice of funding opportunity, what are the criteria that are going to be in it. And it really did spell out a lot of stuff. And I kind of want to walk you through a lot of these things, and trust me, it's important, and we need to talk this through. So the next slide covers the definition of the project areas. Whoops, sorry about that. The project areas, what the state has looked at is they want to have, they call them BSLs. It's broadband service locations. It's a brand new acronym. And I don't know who invented it. I don't know if it's federal and the state adopted it, or I don't know what happened there. But so the first thing we heard was that if a county contained 1,000 BSLs or less that were unserved, that the entire county would be the appropriate area to submit. So it'd be one project for the whole county. Failing that, if there was more than 1,000 PSLs in a county that were unserved, then it would default to school district boundaries, which was kind of interesting. And the idea was that they wanted to have at least 1,000 BSLs in each project area, and that the school district boundaries were ones that were more easily identified politically and more likely to be, if you had competing organizations in a given county, that would be a more likely boundary for them to compete on. Not sure I buy that rationale, but okay. And then failing that, you can always go at the census block level. Now, at the census block level, if you think about it, you might have 5 or 6 census blocks that are adjacent, and you add them up and get to 1,000 BSLs, and that's how you identify your project area. The concern, I think, that the broadband office was having was, if we submitted for a grant and one of the ISPs like Comcast or Ziply submitted, they wanted to be able to compare apples to apples. So they wanted some way to take a piece of this one and a piece of that one and line it up and say, okay, here's what the ISP bid, here's what the public bid, and compare them side by side. So that was one of the keys in how they were doing this. Really, I think the census blocks are the basis for the boundaries, and they're set up on the FCC data. So the BSLs are determined in the FCC data, in the fabric data, and you aggregate it up till you hit at least 1,000. And then that's really what, if you're in a census block, you hit 1,000, including another 100 BSLs that's in the existing census block, takes you to 1,100. That's good. That would be a project area. So that was kind of how they had this set up. The match requirements, why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide? Okay. So this is the actual scoring rubric for the thing. Now, what you'll notice, the very first thing, you can get 40% matching if you have 40% or more. You get 40 points out of 100 if you have 40% or more matching. So the assumption is that the publics, anyway, are going to have the 25% coming from the state, and there's money allocated. We're not sure that there's enough money allocated. I think it's about 200 million. So it doesn't quite hit 25% of the 1.23 billion, but almost. And they're looking in the short session to top that up and make it there. So they're assuming that the public start at at 25%, that's our zero, and that we need to get another 15% in order to get a full 40 points. And then anybody who doesn't have access to that kind of matching has to get up to 40% match to get full points for that. The second part of it is affordability, and this has to do with speed of offer. So if the median speed of offer now for gigabit is somewhere around $80, so it's the median speed is right at the 15 points. If you offer gigabit for less than 75, then you get the full 25 points. And then there's a section that's worth 10 points on fair labor practices, and that's not a very big deal for us, but it would be for others. And then you go down into, they call them the secondary criteria. Those are the primary ones. That's supposedly where they're looking. The secondary ones, how fast can you do it? And that's graded out, maximum points getting it done in 12 months or less, and minimum points if it takes you 4 years. And then open access is defined a bunch of different ways. So if you have 2 or more ISPs that have signed on, which potentially in Point Roberts, for instance, we could get there. Although this is not about Point Roberts, that's already
Right.
awarded, and it's a different program altogether. And then the second part of it is the wholesale cost of the speed that you're delivering. So that's one of the things we've got to ask some questions on. But that's basically where those points come from. And then who else are you working with? You playing nice with the local governments and the tribes. And then do you have access to ACP, which is the low income program, and are there digital guides out there? So do you have the ability to go out and talk to people who are now getting the internet for the first time and making sure that they've got the equipment, the training, and the knowledge to be able to use it. So that's the scoring sheet. And then there's a whole bunch of non-scored items. And some of them are like bonus points, and some of them are binary. In other words, you pass the hurdle or you don't.
I have a question about the last slide, if it's okay to bring it up now. And maybe you'll get to this, but with speed to deployment, for example, everyone's gonna want to complete their construction unless, I mean, how do they align what you hope will happen versus what actually happens? Because this is what you're gonna submit before you do the project. So that would be one of my questions is what happens if you say you're gonna do it in less than 12 months and it takes you 24 months? Because that's 4 points.
So one of the last things that we want to do is get questions from you guys
Okay.
to shoot up to them. That is one of the questions
I'll
that
keep
Andrew
a
and I talked
list
about.
then.
Yeah.
I won't keep interrupting then.
Well, no, I mean,
Okay.
it's fair to go ahead and ask.
Okay,
Because if
okay.
we know and it's in there, we
Okay.
can tell you, and it's
All right.
not a worry. But
Okay, yeah, the speed to deployment. Cause
Yeah,
it
there-
just seems like every project ends up delayed these days,
there's no accountability there.
right?
I mean,
And
I
we
should-
saw that with RDOF too, that, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, let's continue on.
I won't bring that.
That would be an
Okay.
order of magnitude bigger lack of accountability.
Okay. So then there's about 75 pages of these different criteria that are sitting back there. The first one is what to do with those areas that are extremely high cost of service. And if you think about what's left to build in America and Whatcom County, to get really local, it's those customers that you can't affordably serve. That's the whole point. So many of them are going to be in very high cost to serve areas. And there's an anticipation in the document that at some point you'll reach a break point and you'll have a hybrid solution. Or you'll run fiber out to towers, and then you have fixed wireless or 5G wireless doing the final mile and not have fiber for the final mile. And that would greatly reduce your cost to serve. Now, if you're only serving 4 customers and it saves you 8 or 9 miles of fiber, that's a deal. And if you're only serving 4 customers, they're not going to speed load that tower. The problem is when you have hundreds of customers using one tower. So, there's the kind of recognition that there are parts of our geography where running fiber to the home may not make sense financially, where you can have $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a pass. And Those kinds of numbers just don't make a lot of sense. The problem with the approach that WSBO is taking on this is they don't say what that is. They don't say, hey, when you hit $13,000 a pass or more, we're looking for a hybrid. They're just saying kind of after they look at everything, they'll decide what that threshold is. So it's unclear if when they cross that threshold, they then go back and negotiate with people and say, hey, if you do this hybrid, could it be cheaper? Or if it's going to be on us to say, well, that's expensive enough. So from here on out, we're going to do hybrid. And then that's how we submit. And then if we miss that inflection point, we wouldn't get the project. So that's a concern. There's a whole bunch of requirements now that look like they reflect the federal requirements from NTIA in the BEAD announcement, and there's some of it that's not. So on the financial part of it, you have to show that we've got the ability to fund any overruns in the project. So if you propose a project for 5 million, and then 2 years later the cost of fiber doubles and it's going to be 8 or 9 million, they want you to be able to provide proof that the organization making the proposal can fund that. Now, I mean, there's a million different ways to cover that. So it could be additional grant funding from the county. It could be, other funds from inside the organization, or things yet to be named, but you got to be able to show that. And then there's a whole section that really, this is kind of the stuff that we did back of the napkin and formally, but they want it now as part of the submission. They want business plans. They want pro forma marketing plans. How are you going to get out and get 70, 80, 90% penetration? Not just run the fiber past somebody's house. How do you actually get people on the internet? And then what your customer service plans are, all of your pricing plans, staffing plans, digital equity support. So all of that stuff needs to be in the application now. And think about, from our model, some of it would be very difficult, like our customer service plans. If we've got an ISP that's doing this, our customer service plan is, if there's still light to the fiber, you need to have the ISP deal with it, and it's going to be their negotiated service levels, not necessarily ours. On the managerial capability, that's pretty much straightforward. Do you have the ability to manage a broadband service network? On the technical applicability, there's a new one there. They're asking for stamped drawings, stamped design drawings, engineer stamped design drawings in the application. In the last round, we were able to go through and basically price out a route and not do detailed design, not have it engineered until we got the grant. Doing the detailed design could be $100,000 or more for something like Point Roberts upfront, and then you may not get the grant. So just want to make sure that everybody understands that. There's a compliance capability, and that has to deal with prevailing wages, making sure that all your subs are not blocked from federal bidding. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Some of that very easy to do, some of it very, very difficult. The next one is operational capability. And I got to remind you, this is one of those ones where if you can't do it, it's not a valid submission. The applicant must have at least 2 prior years of experience providing voice broadband and show evidence of an FCC 477 filing. In other words, you had to have been an operating ISP for 2 years before you can even apply for one of these grants.
Yeah.
We're not sure that a single PUD in the state can comply with that.
Hopefully Waputo's on that too.
Well, when we get to the comments part of it, there's some recommendations from me on
Yeah.
that.
I'm waiting till you finish the slide, Chris.
So the ownership is really straightforward. If you have subs or however you're owned, you have to show the ownership. For us, I think it would just be our charter that we're filed under. That would demonstrate ownership, public ownership by the county. So we are required to submit that, but I don't think it's a huge problem. The workforce requirements, in a sense, they're similar to what we've done for Point Roberts, where you have to have apprentices. but it's a whole lot more. There's all kinds of broadband career training opportunities you have to provide and that kind of thing. So what's the next slide, Andrew?
Okay.
Okay, so
No,
yeah,
wait, let's stay on
I'm
this
talking
slide.
about this.
Can you go back to the last slide? Thank you. Okay, so the commissioners, let's talk a little bit about this slide. First thing is that I need to say that I feel like this is the NOAANET page, Chris. And let me explain what I mean when I say that. At our last commission meeting, I mentioned that NOAANET was looking for input on their proposal to a proposal to the PUD and to some extent to the broadband office, that NOAANET act as kind of a coordinator of BEAD funding for Washington State for publics. And NOAANET did a session last week, which I don't know if any of the other commissioners attended. If you did, please say so. But I attended. Gina attended in person in Olympia, and I think Chris, you and Andrew were also on for a significant portion of that meeting. That was from 9 to 4 or 5 on.
I think it went 9 to 5.
Yeah, long day meeting. Yeah. So.
Pardon me, 11 to 5.
Okay, sorry, 11 to 5. Yeah. So in that meeting, NOAANET was talking about what role they would like to serve, but it almost looks like to me, Chris, that this page is a page of NOAANET capabilities that they are trying to sell to not just the PUDs, but also to the broadband office. Can you comment on that conjecture?
Yeah, I don't think that's right for a number of reasons, but it's really close. I don't think that Chris had finished even reading the document when he made that presentation. I think that he would have said some different things. The way that they're proposing is to essentially be the conduit or the front man. What the document would say is that no, if we want to lean on them as the ISP, they have to be the recipient of the funds, and they would be the ultimate owner of the assets, which is different than what NOAANET intended. That's not what they wanted. So I really think that they had not looked at this. I think that the broadband office put their thumb on the scales for the privates, and that's what they've done here. Whether they did it intentionally or accidentally, I don't know. The effect is the same.
So
that's how it appears.
When you referring to that, which of these bullets do you think really favor the privates?
The ISP.
I mean, of these bullets, which of these bullets on this list are the ones that are most kind of preferential to internet service providers?
Well, it'd be the managerial, technical, compliance, and operational capabilities, all 4 of those, but especially the operational. When you look at the managerial and technical and compliance, what those are largely customer service levels provided by ISPs directly to customers. There's an awful lot of that language in there. And then on the operational side, it says you have to be an ISP, and you have to have been an ISP for 2 years. And that really excludes, I think a couple of the ports might qualify. I don't know, like the Port of Whitman or somebody, they may be their own ISP. But I believe, our dark fiber model doesn't fit that. Lewis County and Kitsap County, I hope I'm not going to mischaracterize their efforts. They're both lit fiber systems, so they're not ISPs. And in fact, I've talked to Angela Bennick a bunch of times, and her goal is just to get more and more ISPs in her co-location center. So it's available to her customers through lit fiber, but she's not an ISP. And so I really, again, whether WSBO did this intentionally or accidentally, it really does put the thumb on the scales for the privates.
Okay, now, but there are, from what you've presented so far, I also am reading, or I'm understanding, particularly with the stamped designs, that's a challenge for everyone who applies. I can't imagine that an ISP would be less expensive to produce stamped drawings than public, or am I wrong about that? Tell me.
I could explain how to do that from an ISP's perspective, but on the off chance that we have an ISP listening to this, I don't want to hand them a roadmap of how to do it. So let's just say that that's doable.
So you're saying it might, that may also make it a little bit, that may also be a point of differentiation of ease for an ISP relative
Yes,
to- Okay.
yes,
And so just to clarify, this is not scored, but you need to fulfill each of these.
that's correct. These are binary.
Okay.
If you don't cross these hurdles, you don't get to the score sheet.
Mhm.
Yeah, and which is an interesting point, Commissioners, Chris, because I've found that and I've written many grants in my life, and it's easy to focus on the score, but these are the go, no go. So like just because they're not scored doesn't mean they're not important, because if you don't get through the gateway, you don't even get scored. So
Right.
I think it's really looking at the solicitation when it comes out eventually, it will be interesting to figure out if some of the go no goes essentially are just as significant, if not more significant than anything on the score sheet.
Yeah. So,
Thank
I
you.
mean, I have to point out here that I have read through this a couple of times. You're seeing my conclusions. Andrew's read through it a couple times. You're seeing his conclusions. The fact that Andrew and I agree doesn't mean we're right. It just means we agree. So part of what we want to do is ask a bunch of questions of the broadband office to make sure that the way that we're seeing this and the way that we understand it is in fact what they mean. Now, there's a formal way to do that. Andrew already tried to give them some input and they said, no, you do it through the website, through the portal. Here's how you do that. I am not convinced that any of those questions will be answered by the 30th.
Mhm.
So,
No, yeah, and another concern I have is that there's only one WAPUDA meeting in November. There's this other thing going on that no one that's got on the table. The other windows that they gave for response were much longer. There's Thanksgiving in the middle of this, announcement to getting comments. I think it's November 30th is an awfully tight window to get the publics to be able to provide proper feedback in response to this. And it makes me a little bit concerned why such a short timeline. So.
well, and then there's the other thing. This was fired off, and then a day later, the broadband WISBO director announced his retirement.
Mark Bistoni already?
Yep.
He's only been there for a year.
Yeah, he announced his retirement. It's effective on the end of the year.
I think
Wow,
what-
that's
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's in and of itself concerning.
Yeah.
We worked so hard to train the previous broadband office director, and now we trained another one, and if you recall, there was consequences to interims and new directors. This whole effort's moved a lot slower than it could have if we were in continuity.
Yeah.
And we're doing it again. And I don't know.
Regardless of the speed, I don't think the fairness is right. So,
Well, yeah, well,
you know,
yeah, we're suffering.
we could have
on
done
both-
it really fast and ended up at this point. And I'm still not happy
When is he retiring?
at the end of this year.
The end of the year, okay.
Yeah, so he's gone the end of next month. He's got
Okay.
about 6 weeks left.
Do
So-
you have more slides?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We do. So here, this is kind of the layout, which includes, when they expect the NOFO to come out, and then bidding and construction projects and that kind of stuff. That's what's been laid out. We're going to submit clarifying questions to WISBO. As I said, I am not confident that they're going to answer by November 30th. So while we want to do that, we want all the questions. And Andrew, he's roughed out a bunch of them here, and there's just a bunch more. I think our response, we need to have a response from this utility to this. And we need a response from WAPUDA to this. When you think about the model that we have on the municipal water law, that's a good model. where everybody who's concerned writes as a group and individually. And that this is one where I am very much in favor of us having our own response, as well as being fully signed on to whatever WPUDA does. Assuming they see it's a problem. You know, I can't imagine that they wouldn't. And in fact, I would think NOAANET would see this as a problem. Because for NOAANET, if we wanted to use NOAANET the way that they had originally proposed, well, we couldn't, but what we would do is we would say, okay, NOAANET will be the representative and the owner of the assets for Whatcom County. And then we would help them put their grant submission together, and then we're done. And NOAANET would win or lose. If they won, they would build it and operate the network, and we're done. So the last thing is that we had anticipated that there would be tranches of this, about 200 million a year, more or less. They're going to do it all in one shot.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And when you read through the document, I would highly recommend you read through it. It's unfortunately really, really good bedtime stuff. About 170 pages of, but they just have so many little tidbits, wonderful little nuggets in there. I'll describe it that way. But one of them was, if you have a BSL, a broadband service location, that everybody agrees is a BSL that's unserved, and they're not served for whatever reason in any proposal, then the WSBO will go back to the nearest ISP and negotiate with them to serve this. And at that point, I would guess that all bets are off. That, you know, the ISP could say, well, I'll serve them, but you got to fund 100%, and you know, no open access, and no, you know, and if WSBO said yes, then that's how it would go. Their goal is to have that done about 60 days after the submission date for the response to the NOFOs. So we'll have some time to respond to the NOFO, put our project in, and then they're thinking 60 days after that, they will have negotiated all of the maybe it was 90 days, but it's very, very quick. They would have negotiated all of the projects and then gone to, you know, a secondary level. And it's a wonderful document. I was just absolutely delighted reading through it, and it was uplifting, made me just happy as a clam.
Okay, Chris.
Hey, wow. Tell my book club about it.
So,
When are you? Oh,
Commission, I just wanted to frame a conversation now for the three of us on this subject. Of course, WPUDA telecom meetings are this week. I'd like to be able to effectively discuss and advance some questions from Whatcom to the WPUDA community at the telecom committee, either at that. I've already had a brief back and forth with Angela, who chairs the telecom committee. It's a very busy, full agenda, and this has kind of caught the group off guard a little bit, and yet we're going to have some side discussion or some follow-up meeting to discuss this, to see if WPUDA can respond. It also occurs to me, Chris, had known that might have some thoughts on. I'd like to hear NOAANET's thoughts on this too. So, Commission, what questions do we want to raise and have answered?
Well, I guess first of all, I'm happy to take anything you got right now,
okay.
but we need to also give you some time to think about this. And, you know, we're going to submit the questions probably by the end of this week.
Okay.
That's our goal. And at the same time, we want to proceed with writing a response letter.
Well, do you want to go first?
No, I mean, I guess it's not even a question. Well, it is a question. So if they've created this document that says that you have to be an ISP for 2 years before you can even apply for the grant, like that's it. If that's a moot point, we can't apply.
Yeah.
Almost all of the public utilities can't apply for a
Right.
grant. So what's the point? That has to change. That's my only.
Yeah, that's like the
comment. I
elephant
mean,
in the
yeah,
room,
yeah,
isn't it?
that's
Yeah.
the one,
It is the
Yeah,
problem.
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with that. Do they have to change?
No, they don't have to. They
Exactly.
should. Yeah,
Yeah, we think they should.
I would say, so that's clearly the biggest issue.
yeah.
Based on,
Yeah.
I have not had the pleasure of reading this document yet, Chris, but,
Well, the other thing is that it assumes the applicant is an ISP, that they run a call center, that they have all of their emergency response troops lined up.
Yeah.
You know, well, we're gonna contract a lot of that. We're not gonna have it internally anyway. So, you know, it's a real,
so I totally agree with Jamie that this is clearly the biggest issue. And I think hopefully Wapuda will include that in their letter. I would also suggest that Wapuda get some sort of press release ready if this does in fact move forward. I thought that crosscut article that they did about the challenge process a year and a half ago was really good.
Yeah.
And it got like the limelight on like, oh, this is an unfair process that, because I think that a lot of the general public would like to see a lot more public involvement and accountability from the ISPs. And so people don't have the time to read these things, right? So making it digestible in case we think this is going to move forward. I mean, my other two big things, other than the one that Commissioner Arnett brought up, was with the speed to deployment question. How are they going to enforce this?
No, there is
just-
a clawback section
There
in
is a
there.
clawback?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can read that, but it is more if you don't deliver the speed or the price, the speed of connect, the internet speed,
Mhm.
not the construction speed. But I think it would apply to all terms. But you know, so somebody gets $50 million and then they just take it and run, which is what happened with the RDOF funds. And they look at it and say, well, gosh, my internal carrying costs is 10%. So as long as I can spend 5 million or less per year on lawyer fees, I should just keep the money.
Well, that's my question. And I think we have seen.
Sorry, John.
We've
No
seen this
offense.
with
I'm
RDOF.
getting-
He's used to
Little
it.
trouble.
Uh,
But I'm gonna let it go.
But, you know, I think that I feel like we've seen again and again that these enforcement clauses usually don't work. And so, I don't know. I'm not wild about how they set up the speed to deployment point system. It seems like they should engineer that a different way. Or maybe even have it be part of the no-go thing, no-go things. Can you do this in less than 24 months or not? Or something like that.
Mhm.
Or, you know, and then I think around this question of operational capability and us, you know, having to have been an FCC approved ISP for 2 years, like one of the things I've really seen over the last few years is that I do think local involvement on broadband is improving services to everyday people. I just don't think that the state and federal agencies are in the weeds enough to really understand where pain points are for people. And we've done a much better job saying, hey, RDOF's not working. We need to help people. And then they're
Well,
like, oh, we had no idea. Thanks
yeah.
for letting us know.
My comment, and I don't know if I made this comment to Andrew, but I said that they're replicating the federal level failure of the RDOF program
Mhm.
at the state level.
I agree.
And that's not helpful.
My last piece of feedback for our letter is that I really hope they separate the funding into tranches so that they can learn. I think, you know, I think a lot of, you know, start with the smallest amount of fun, you know, we shouldn't do it all at once because we're going to make mistakes. Giving ourselves the opportunity to learn as we go makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that doing the projects in smaller batches is gonna help people implement them on time too, I would think. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, but it just feels like there's a pretty high risk from just doing it all in one grant cycle. Haven't had a lot of time to think about it, but it
Yeah.
raised a red flag for me. I don't know if either of you felt like that was a red flag. for
Well,
you.
having led construction organizations that do
Yeah.
this kind of work, you're more efficient with the large volume work
Yeah,
rather than small piecemeal stuff.
I mean, that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
I can argue both sides of
Yeah.
it. I think the issue is going to be for me, we know, because we hear from our customers that are hurting, that want service. We are the ones that are close to this, and the work that Gina and Andrew have done on digital equity and all of the work, especially that Gina has done over the last couple of years, getting with the library districts and doing all of the outreach. We know where the pain points are,
Mhm.
and the state does not. NOAANET does not,
Mhm.
and the federal government does not. So for me, that's a really compelling argument for having a lot more involvement at the local level.
Totally, yeah.
I'm Lewis County, they got 40 million last year in three different, and it's causing them to build it out really efficiently.
Oh, okay.
So I think that if we're going to get a big slug of money here in Whatcom County, I just think that if it was given to the PUD or the port to oversee, we would do it efficiently.
Okay.
We wouldn't break it up and do it inefficiently, but I'm not really sure that the big guys would do the same. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just summarize 3 points that I noted from this conversation, and that is that this point about the FCC approved ISP requirement for 2 years. The second was the enforcement for the timeliness of execution. And the third point I have is a need for stamped engineering documents. Is that a good kind of initial, at least for conversations that when I have with at the telecom committee to pursue further, see what answers the other folks might have on that?
I have another question. So they want public comment by November 30th.
Mhm.
So 2 weeks, they put the document out and then you have 2 weeks. So even if you had a cross.
Technically, we had 4 weeks. They put it out on November 1st.
Oh, November, okay. So
Yeah, I didn't start reading it until the 3rd.
Okay.
My apologies. but-
We don't. So realistically though, there's not enough time for people to like respond to this.
Well,
So there's 157 pages.
there was
So-
plenty of time on the first volume, which is about the same size. Because it wasn't controversial. There were no surprises. This one,
Yeah,
we thought, it's a month for the first one, month for the second one. Worked on the first one, should be fine. And it's just a different breed cat altogether.
I mean, I think everybody would like to have more time.
Chris, I think the notification on the first one was more than a month, significantly more than a month, but I could be wrong about that.
We can check it. It wasn't very long. I think they were comparable.
Okay. So, okay, I think I have what I need. I went over the points that I captured from the conversation. Obviously, when before the RPUD responds officially, we will have a chance to review a letter that Chris drafts for us to review and approve. So I'll do my best to learn more and bring it back to the commission at the
Atul, one last thing is that I think that expressing our concern about staffing at the state broadband office could also be appropriate. I mean, they were without a director for almost a year, right? And then they've been understaffed basically my entire time that I've been a commissioner, it seems like. And I know that's
Certainly.
a problem
Sure, I'll
across the
I
board,
will
but
certainly bring that up.
I don't have any idea how they could do the volume of work they're looking at, because just it took forever just to get our little contract for Point Roberts,
yeah.
which was, Andrew did all the work for him and handed it to him. And it took months to turn the thing around.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. So what I'll do is we'll get the clarifying questions. Please send them directly to me. And then Andrew and I'll compile them all, get them back out to you, and you'll have that Atul before the telecom meeting. And that's not the end of it. If you think of something in the middle of the night, just send it to me. Doesn't matter.
Do you have what we've shared here
Yeah.
though? So it's just if we have anything in addition to what we've just said.
Yeah, and I'll
Okay,
shoot it out
okay.
and you can shoot back to me. And
Okay.
we need to do this iteratively. I don't, I've had time to stew on this, but you guys haven't.
Okay.
And again, I would urge you to pull that document up, take a look at it,
Okay.
and take
So
some
our next
Advil or
meeting,
Tylenol before you do it.
Yeah, so Commissioner, our next meeting is after Thanksgiving on the 28th. Chris, and Commission, is that sufficient time for us to approve, have a letter and then approve it at the next commission meeting, and then you can send it off after that? Is that all realistic?
I think with the assumption that we're going to assume that all these questions are either unanswered or answered in the opposite direction of what we would like to see, and then the letter will be based on that. We got to.
Let's say that we're infuriated that things in public.
It will be the commission's, it will be the commission's letter to the broadband office in response to this volume 2. And you're probably going to be a lot more polite than I would be left to my own devices, although John would rein me in.
So it goes, I wanted to express, Chris, my appreciation to you and Andrew for jumping on this. It's certainly something that would not have been gotten the attention that it deserved if you hadn't jumped on it on November 3rd. I do appreciate it. And it sounds like you're going to be also very supportive to the other PUDs and the PUD community. So thank you in advance for that support. So, and thanks for bringing it to our attention. Commission, when we were planning this meeting, it was my intention to talk about the NOAANET proposal. The NOAANET proposal, though, is a side issue until this issue is, until we respond to this for obvious reasons. And being the optimist, I'm hopeful that whatever we're able to get from the broadband office may or may not steer what we say to NOAANET as well. So this is obviously the both more urgent and important consideration. So instead of talking about the NOAANET proposal, which is still important, that'll probably be something we discuss in December, because the deadline for that NOAANET's asking on that proposal is in January. So
in January, okay. And I just a question. It sounds like you've been following that the closest. Tool, thank you for being on top of that. Is that something where we could get Chris to come and join a meeting to give a quick overview, or I don't know if Andrew, but kind of tee the discussion up, getting some background, because I'm going to need to do some homework to feel prepared for that discussion. So I guess just whether it's a document or a quick PowerPoint overview, or just before that meeting, it would be great to be able to have done my homework.
Yeah, and I would just, we can have Chris come and he'd be happy to.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, he's really good about that, and he's a really approachable individual.
Yeah.
And it just, yeah. So we can do that. The issue that I've got is, gosh, the proposal that he made sounded like it would be a good thing for a county that didn't have a lot of capacity, that didn't have a broadband team, that didn't have a GIS expert, that didn't have, somebody like Gina that was entwined in all of the organizations. It'd be great for that. For us, it was kind of like a middleman you pay more money to.
Yeah.
Now, this may flip that. This may be the only way that we can get public ownership and public involvement. And so, depending on what comes back from the broadband office, the offer from NOAANET might have to be radically different.
Might be essential.
Might be the only option.
Right.
Yeah.
They would clearly meet the operational capability, go, no go.
I'm not sure
criteria.
they've got a stamped engineer,
Okay.
first of all. I think they have limited technical capacity. They could do it for they could do a couple of projects, and we know that because we've used them for that. But there are limits. The size of their call center is limited because they aren't geared up for the whole state right now. So, it's one of those things where if they're our only option and we want to pursue that, we're going to have to do some real capacity building with NOAANET.
Okay.
So it's and I'd be happy to get Chris here to talk to us about the whole
Or
thing.
if it's not Chris, just let me know if there's a recording for, I guess all I'm saying is I haven't been following it as closely. Cause you know how things shift for which commissioner's doing what. So I just don't have a ton of background right now on that proposal. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
and I think I'm really confident that Chris will keep us up to speed, but and obviously I'll make sure that when we are preparing for the December meeting agendas that we're ready for that content to be discussed completely.
Thank you.
Well, commission, are we
I
ready?
have
to move-
nothing else to say on broadband.
Andrew, did you want to get the last word on this? Maybe an expression, at least a emoticon to express how you feel.
Yeah, and I'm do an emoji.
Attempting to stay calm. Yes. Yes.
So.
Thank you, Andrew and Chris.
So
Great.
the next item is the adjudication update, and that's a brief comment from John.
May not be brief.
Oh, no.
I'm sitting in the paddock waiting to be released for last thing. I have two things I want to cover. I thought I'd give a summary of the Water Law Institute that I attended a week and a half ago now. Kind of cover the high points, takeaways that I had, and then also give you an update from a couple minor takeaways and one of concern from the Water Resources Advisory Committee to Ecology's presentation that earlier this week. So I'll start with the Water Law Institute. As you recall that I attended the Water Law Institute about a week ago. It was valuable from my perspective. You had a lot of key players from the federal government present. You also had Lummi in-house counsel. Merle was there, Andy Ross was there, Turtle was there, and their new Natural Resource Division staff person was there as well. Her name's escaping me. Had some opportunities, a chance chat with all briefly at different points in time and have lunch with other folks that were of value. I think I'll just go through some of the topical sections, the presentations, and give you my takeaways without giving you a full 2-day presentation here. The first topic was how climate change is reshaping the West, and technically this is kind of something I took away significant, and that is that we have a drying continent, and it's evidenced by the groundwater supply as well as stream flows and remember, this was in Arizona, and the focus of most of the speakers was the Colorado River Basin from Nebraska, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and that what they said is independent of climate change. There's the evidence this is happening, and largely based on human consumption and population growth. So it reminded me of my 1983 Huxley human ecology class about, consumptive society that we have that is really largely driving a lot of our drying continent. And then you accelerate that with climate change. The temperature of water is being affected by the melting and reducing glaciers, as well as the increasing air temperatures. And the message was the water supply crisis needs to be elevated to the level of carbon crisis. We're focused on carbon, but there is a water crisis that's independent of and being accelerated by climate change. And we need to find a way to value water and value the consequences of depleting groundwater. And I think as I weave through some thoughts and we get to some solutions that people were talking about, that notion needs to be recalled. So the next one was water management in flux.
If I can catch you in the middle there before you move on to the
Yep.
next one. Yeah, so I've long held the belief that even though I worked on clean energy most of my life, I would say that water is more important than carbon. And a drier continent is a perception, and it's backed by the reality. But it's also important to realize that part of the solution is to keep more water on the freshwater side of the balance sheet. So what's happening is that our approach to how we manage water is pushing more water into the ocean quickly from a drainage perspective. And the more flooding we have, the more calls there are for better drainage. But in fact, it's actually the opposite approach that's going to get us out of the situation, which is tying up more fresh water in the ecosystem. And that's why it was very important for me to add resilience as a key component of the PUD's high-level strategy. So thank you.
Water management in flux, a takeaway again was discussion on the relationship of water and climate change. There was a large review of the Arizona water management systems that they have and how they break things together. And then a passing review of the Colorado Water Trust and water banks. Slightly different than water banking in Washington, but there's very small projects and has some success, but they're not large banking structures yet. Key was review of the determination of adequacy of water supply, which is kind of a Hearst case. Prioritize local production of food where reliable water supply exists. Reliability equals legal availability. And this kind of goes back to comprehensive planning at Whatcom County. We talked about in our own capital facility planning concepts for industrial supply, but agricultural supply and agricultural zoning would arguably need to follow where legal availability of water exists. Focus on incentives, which again we'll trail through here, but monitoring and reporting. So the key measure that came through here was you have to monitor and measure. And there's a resistance regionally for monitoring water supplies and monitoring wells and metering wells, but we can't manage what we can't measure is a big takeaway. So manage and managing water depends upon monitoring, measuring. So some of this presentation has, questions for solutions, which I think is a good takeaway. Will it withstand long-term climate trends? Will the framework support a robust economy? Are there equity considerations, which are a central feature, underserved populations? I think here you're unique in the Southwest is reservations that are still tribal reservations that still have, very hut-based living and lack of water, and they're trucking in water or bucketing in water. Are supplies truly sustainable? Will it support healthy ecosystems? Can and do tribes play a meaningful role? Is it enforceable? Can you sustain legal challenge? We did a review of court decisions, and I'm not going to go all of them, but some of them take away for you that is interesting, and some we are familiar with as lawyers here. Federal government, a recent case, Arizona Navajo Nation, very recent, last 6 months. Federal government does not have an affirmative duty to develop tribal water rights absent express obligation. So do you have a duty to develop or just protect? So that was a nuanced difference. Alaska, which had a case which could be an evolving case in the West, the groundwater resource is subject to the Alaska Public Trust Doctrine, which requires the state to regulate and administer groundwater for public use, but also to prevent it from contamination. So the public trust expressed duty on the state. I think you could see claims like that in Washington. NEPA and Environmental Species Acts require agencies to sufficiently consider downline impacts on the Colorado River from increased contamination from a railroad. So downline is beyond the main line. It's not just downstream. So it's beyond, you have to look beyond the standard action area. Clean energy impact type of thing. Water scarcity conservation, again, sustainable use, what demand sectors are affected, what equity is among users. So you see a lot of kind of consistent themes coming through. Connect actions with consequences. One interesting thing was the innovative approach to climate change challenges to water law is that historical models are often flawed, and we've been arguing that. And the recent trend analysis is typically more aggressive than complete historical analysis. And so how do you extrapolate? Meaning, do you take the last 5 years, which may be very aggressive in the depletion of water supply, for instance, or the impacts, for 20 years or 100 years? So you're graphing, if it's like this, what is your accurate trend analysis to extrapolate? If you're just taking this 5 years, that may not be accurate. It's 20 years to right. And then what about the anomalies? We had 2 years ago, we had a heavy wet year. So you have an anomaly that could affect the trend, particularly if you take a narrow slice versus a 20-year slice. So what is the right slice for? It's a good description of in a graphical form that this professor did, just showing the problems with extrapolation for accuracy. Talk about regulatory barriers. We had wet year recharge as an issue. How do you manage? How's project reliability? Modification, expansion of permit processes that create limitations to development of solutions. We talked about that, Christine. Other related there's an interesting hydropower innovation down in Goldendale, at the old, Alcoa site, which, they're using a closed loop pump storage project, that, at first blush, it looks like, gosh, why couldn't we do this at Alcoa and Talco here, but we don't have the topography, necessarily to create, I'm using my political science description, the head to create the pressure, to create the closed loop system. But, it still seems to me that, engineering is a solution to everything. There might be could there be some viable similar type of project at an old brownfield site? Because this company was looking at brownfield sites for that kind of clean energy development. We did a review of some water rights settlements. Very interesting presentation by an attorney. She's a member of the Delaware tribe, but grew up in Oklahoma rather, excuse me. So she gave a history of the Delaware tribes and their agreements with the federal government and their agreement to relocate to Oklahoma, and then, how that evolved. And I'm not Catholic, but she tried to correlate cultural aspects to other communities. So she says water and salmon to the Native Americans is like the Eucharist for Catholics. If the Pope said a specific wheat was necessary for the Eucharist, taking of the body of Christ in theory, and that wheat wasn't available, how could you perform your sacrament? You couldn't. So that was, there's a cultural example of what losing salmon and water is to the tribes. So the other takeaways that I had, and building them into a presentation I'm doing at the end of the month, I talked about scenarios that drive settlements. And it is what we talked about all along, is every party needs risk. Everybody needs to stare into the abyss. Their risk may be different, but collectively everyone needs risk to get to a settlement. There has to be desire amongst the parties. Solutions are costly and can take decades, have institutional barriers. We talked about that. I've been saying that creative solutions are technical, legal, financial, and political, 4 legs. I'm expanding that to say cultural, and that all legs require compromise. The incentives the presentation on incentives for settlement and tribes is for quantification of water rights, using their bargaining power to obtain funding for infrastructure, protect their resources, and habitat restoration. It's typically what tribes are seeking. This was from a federal government, Department of Interior, who's focused on the water rights settlements, but not a tribal person speaking. Non-federal entities, which would be us, so it's continued and assured use of water, limit natural resource damage claims. So this would be applicable to ag communities, municipals, local municipal. Federal government to fulfill their trust responsibility and limit natural resource damage claims, and for state government to fulfill their obligation to allocate or manage water resource and limit their natural resource claims. So compromise and settlement, measure and manage. Strong governments consider incentives for behavior, but also enforcement for bad behavior. Quantification of tribal rights, management of in-stream flows and temperature. Need to have methods and conditions to continually ensure availability of water for non-tribal users. Need water supply projects to meet the above needs. Going to have federal funding, project-based funding, or a fund-based or hybrid type of funding mechanisms. Need binding mechanisms for enforcement, often a federal decree. Need some strong governance with resource management administration. Likely will need federal and or state legislation. So that's my summary of 2 days, but it was very good. It was, a lot of these seminars that are focused like this, when you've been around a while, you can get into the in-depth components, more technical aspects, and that was very interesting. It was a valuable time. Unless there's any questions, it's not recorded yet. I don't have all the materials delivered to me yet. I'm still waiting for some. I can produce those for you.
That would be great. Love to see some of those materials. Any questions from the commission?
And I have one other thing for the
go ahead.
water resource app, right? Separate topic. So go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you if there was a particular part of the conference that gave you optimism And if so, what was that and where is it happening?
It's happening in Arizona and in Colorado, even though their agreements are coming up. That they are reaching some agreements. I specifically had lunch with the US Commissioner for her name was, or sat at lunch next to each other. I had a chance to chat with her. Ann Castle, US Commissioner for the Upper Colorado River Commission, and she's a fellow at the University of Colorado School of Law on water law. Chatted with her about what we're trying to build for solutions, and yeah, but it takes a long time. It just takes a long time. And my takeaway is it takes a long time and we don't have the time. And it's getting parties to recognize that. And I would share more thoughts in executive session next time on that.
Okay.
So John?
Yeah.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sure. Was there good representation on the next generation there of lawyers?
Interesting. At that same luncheon with this woman, there was from University of Colorado, there was a young law student there from Colorado. There was a smattering of other young law students. It was lawyers from around the West. A lot of technical people from around the West. A lot of, there was an attorney from the Puyallup tribe. Like I said, the Lummi had a large contingent. There was an attorney from Spokane, the Confluence Law, who is going to be representing parties in this adjudication. That was really the Washington lawyers that were there. No one that I recall from Ecology. There was an attorney from Yakima, Larry Martin, that I know. He had been involved in the Aquavella case, but I think he's going to age out to really participate in the Nooksack adjudication. So there wasn't a lot of long-term depth, but this is the first, after 35, 40 years of being a lawyer, it's the first out-of-state conference I've been to. And I don't think young lawyers often, I take that there was a presenter from Van S. Feldman in Washington, and she does some water law. And there's some young lawyers with firms doing presentations.
Yeah, you know what I'm getting at. I mean, I sit in these meetings and I look around and frequently I'm the youngest person in the room.
Yeah.
And that's frightening.
Yeah.
So John,
Just-
did you hand out brochures for Whatcom County when you were there?
I say that again.
Did you hand out brochures for Whatcom County while you were there?
Chamber of Commerce, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I think it applies to adjudication also. You had said we can't manage what we can't measure. So, when we decide, well, not we, when Ecology decides, who gets how much water, I imagine that wells will have to be metered.
Ecology right now is saying that they're not going to, there's no proposal on the table for any metering of wells. I expect that to change.
Yeah.
I would expect some kind of order. The way the political process will work is Ecology will hide behind, we didn't order it, it was the court that ordered it. We're just complying with the court order, and that someone's going to say that we need a meter, and the court will say it, and Ecology will end up hiding, saying we didn't say it. It was the court that ordered it, and to get an adjudicated certificate to protect your right and to monitor it, to confirm what your valid right is over time, there has to be a meter. I haven't really thought through how that's going to come through, but I won't be surprised if in 5-10 years, when you're starting to get pathways through, there will be a metering. It could be that to avail yourself of the streamlined process for a adjudicated certificate for a groundwater exempt well, if you want to take the highway, the HOV lane, one of the conditions is that you agree to metering. I mean, that could be what is proposed. I don't know how that's going to come about, but that could be it.
Yeah, it seems like the writing's on the wall for metering. My other question. would
Fair to
be-
say.
Yeah, is who would monitor?
Big question.
Big question. It'll end up being, probably over time. Remember, the adjudication is, in theory, is just going to develop a list of your valid legal water rights, and there's a list, and then there's an enforcement. You will then say, well, where do the monitor, how do you monitor it? Is it a reporting? It could be a reporting requirement that has to be submitted to ecology on a regular basis. It could be the homeowner who has to submit that and collect the data off their meter. That is all to be sorted out, and probably why ecology doesn't want to walk into it, because they're creating another agency.
Yeah, yeah.
Within
You
an
said
agency.
that there would have, that you said in another part that there has to be enforcement of those things. So
Yeah.
it seems like this is an enforcement issue.
It's there, many enforcement. It's going to be
Yeah.
compliance with your valid water right. It's going to be monitoring it. How do you enforce monitoring? So there's a lot of administrative workouts that are going, in any solution, are going to have to be resolved. I think that you you see in all these jurisdictions, some conservation board, whether, Aquavella has an irrigation district. That's a unique aspect in the Yakima Basin. There was an irrigation district. It just dealt with groundwater. It was largely a water adjudication that dealt with irrigation uses primarily, less the fish uses, less the in-stream flow issues. So you had an available governing body. So we're going to have to find a way to create one. You're going to have significant tribal participation on that. Whether the tribes accept that, given their senior water right in their treaty right, we don't know how far that will be accepted. That's going to require state or federal legislation or a decree of some type. It's going to take years to get to that point, but that's where the compromise on the governance legal side of those legs is going to happen by all parties. So yeah, there's so much to work out. I mean, it's complex because I always like to say, a lot of these negotiations are that old Star Trek 3-level chess game where they move up, down, and across. This is 6 or 7 levels. It's just massively complex.
Well, and it's really hard because we have funding from the state for the adjudication. But a lot of the really critical players, like there isn't the staff necessarily, the funding for staff from all the different parties involved to spend the time that is needed to come to the table to craft the solution. I mean, it's going to be hard enough just for people to prepare for the legal process, much less the settlement. Hearing you speak and just climate change, the impacts of climate change and the water supply crisis in general, it's just, we don't have the right agencies and sort of systems in place to respond to this yet. Of course there's a water supply crisis in addition to a carbon crisis, but yeah, I mean, I just think we're still really at the beginning stages of figuring out how to respond to all of this.
Why I've advocated that we need someone highly placed in the governor's
Yeah.
office to be a driver on this and solutions that can work through the halls of Congress, can work through the legislature,
Yes.
can work with the local parties who is tasked with trying to drive solutions.
Where is that suggestion? And I know that was part of last year's legislative.
It is still talked about. It is
Okay.
not going to have movement in the session. It is going to have I think there's a lot of bricks to build in the foundation to get to those
Okay.
driving solutions. We have to build a culture of solution amongst the parties, and then we can get to how do we do it? There's just so many. It's almost relational development, I think, right now.
But the process isn't ready for that to go to the
I don't think
session.
I don't think the process is ready. It's necessary.
Okay. Thanks
So-
for the
So,
update.
To dive deeper, John, Chris, are we planning any in December or November executive sessions to discuss where we are on our adjudication effort?
We
Or
can do
you
one. We'll probably give an update the next one. I will have some updates, reports, some of my discussions in executive session, the next meeting.
What would the
We
commission like?
did have a long executive session on adjudication preparation last time, so I don't think we're going to repeat that.
Right. So I'm just, John, I'm trying to get a pulse here, on the commission. So maybe, folks, we have got a November 28th meeting and then we have a December meeting. I'm wondering, should we just plan maybe, to bring it up once, before the end of the year? Does that sound good for everybody?
Yeah, I think maybe the December meeting, we can, because we're final, yeah, maybe the December meeting, John, you can just.
Yeah,
do a
I'm
quick update.
Sure, I'm doing a presentation I can give you an update on the 29th. At this Farmers Pavilion for the Small Farmers Association. I was looking to see where our
28th is our.
I have a NOOCSAC check-in on the Friday, the 8th, so it's our next meeting, the 11th or 12th.
Well,
Yeah, so I'll have some various things to report on that.
And if I recall, we only have one meeting in December, right?
Two?
We'll have to approve claims at the second meeting.
Oh, so we'll have a short meeting.
it's like a Zoom. One.
Okay, my other updates from the Water Resources Advisory Committee, two things. College reported that all water users confirmed with what you expected who have a claim that they have a record of will be notified by certified mail with instructions and together with a form on how to prepare the form, instructions, what to do, and 1 year for deadline for return of the form. That 1 year is part of our HB 1792 we passed. That draft form, we required in that legislation that was passed a 60-day notice and comment. The college is going to do an outreach and expects a focus group by the end of the month. Some multiple focus groups probably to comment on, review the form and comment on the draft in Whatcom County. I anticipate myself or our consultant, Steve Joke, will attend one of those and report to me. The other thing that came out of that meeting that was of concern, there was when discussing the NOOCSAC adjudication, there was a commissioner from another district that wrote in the chat box, kind of just out of the blue, that Whatcom County PUD does not have any industrial water users or water rights or something to that effect. Very disconcerting that a commissioner from another PUD would comment on an adjudication occurring that's outside of their jurisdiction and with another PUD's water right that was factually inaccurate. And to ecology in a written form on a chat. My reaction is my thought is that I would send them and tell the commission, if you have a really concern with this, let's have a discussion. But my inclination is to send a letter to the commission for Thurston County with a copy of the screenshots of the comments and advise that it's incorrect. And ask if they have questions, that contact our staff to get the corrective information and copy ecology on this so that the record is clear. The single comment won't have a material effect in adjudication. I think it's on the side, it's completely inappropriate for a commission to comment on another district's actions. And the concern to be is if this had legs, if something got picked up and it wasn't nipped in the bud and somehow some story grew out of this that was inaccurate, we would have something more material to address. So I intend to send a simple letter to that commission with a copy to a college. And I'm going to pull the recording up and grab a screenshot of the comment.
So the Water Resource Advisory Committee meetings are not recorded.
This one was.
Oh, really? It's a new thing they've started then.
I think it was because of college he was doing the presentation. We were told it was going to be recorded and presented and saved, so.
Yeah, I'm making.
I would assume so, but I'm going to check that.
John, before you proceed with that, I'm asking that you give me a call and we can talk about that offline.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm going to Olympia this week, maybe I can have a loving conversation in the hallway with.
I think this is best. I'll talk to you, but I think this was a public comment in a public forum. I think we need to respond simply, directly, and nip it in the bud. And because it was public, I think we need to be public, but simple and direct.
Right, yeah, and it might, and it may be what I'm talking about might be complementary to that too, to minimize any bruising from that. I think we need to, if we need to respond officially, we should respond officially. But in addition to that, to manage any hurt feelings from that. So,
I'm not so concerned about hurt feelings. When someone hits me and I hit them back, I want them to know they got hit. You know, I mean, this is an action that deserves a bruise.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
I think I'll be the judge of that, Chris, and I'm just gonna set a little bit of pushback here. The reality is that the PUD's relationship with the community is absolutely a commissioner responsibility. And so I take that role seriously. So I'm going to try to avoid whatever we do to have that action not be misinterpreted and be interpreted, and for example, to be interpreted as combative. It's just for protecting our interests. That's all.
I would hope that our commission does not make comments in a public forum or at PUD or elsewhere that directly affects and would undermine the legal interests of another PUD. You could take policy statements and have a policy debate that's different, but to make a comment that is directly challenges a legal position of another PUD in a public forum, where that other PUD has no interest, because this was about the Nooksack adjudication. It'd be like saying, we're going to comment on the Yakima adjudication specifically when the legal issue that's being commented on is not, it's about the Yakima PUD's water claim, not the Yakima tribal claim. So specific to another PUD's legal interest that other PUD has no interest in. That's the concern. Policy debates are one thing, but direct challenges to the legal position of another PUD is of concern.
If one of our commissioners did that, I would think that I would want them censured. I think that's a significant thing. That's a significant thing that they did. And a comment that they made that was inaccurate and inflammatory during the Department of Ecology meeting. So I think the response should be significant.
We might have some disagreement in the commission, and let's do that in executive session in December. So, but
We have something in the Q&A.
what's that?
We've got something in the Q&A.
Great.
Hopefully it's.
Okay, someone is asking about
Oh.
Jamie's, if we can move it slightly closer to her.
Is it on?
No.
My inclination isn't to propose what another commission might do. You know, like I wouldn't suggest censure or anything like that. I would just express the objection.
Mhm.
I think it's on.
Yeah, I think the point of discussion, I've got some things I want to share, but I think it's better that you and I talk about them first, John, and then we discuss it.
I would like not to. I think the letter is warranted in the next 2 weeks. That's just, you need to respond.
Well, John, the
when
ball's
something
in your
happens.
court. You can call me.
Okay, I didn't want to wait to the next executive session to review a draft letter, so I'd like to get something out shortly, but I'll call you first, Nicole.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I had. But it was a good conference. It was worth the time to go. And given the level of discussion, just from the presentation, I think it's worth that I monitor it for next year. It sounds like they're going to try to do it again, something similar.
It sounds really worth
Ramsey Croftley, who's representing the Egg Board,
Mhm.
was one of the chairpersons for the presentation.
Okay, any other conversation on the water update? Okay, let's move on the agenda to our retreat conversation. Chris, I'd ask you to.
I have to admit, I have not done anything with this in the 2 weeks since we met. I was gonna look for other consultants and do all that, and a lot of stuff just trumped it. So if I can beg forgiveness, and I'll have it for next time.
Do you know anybody that is local that could be good at facilitating this?
I do. Well, I'd have to look at some names, but yeah,
Okay.
there are some really great facilitators.
Yeah.
So commissioners, in addition to the facilitator. In our last commission meeting where we discussed this, and Chris, since it's been a while, I'll ask you to review the recording of our last commission meeting where we discussed the retreat. There was more in that discussion than just the issue of identifying another additional facilitators. There was content of the wants of the commission, and the commission was asking staff for some to help with structuring a discussion around the board retreat. And I myself now can't recall that. I can review it, and maybe you and I can have in our next Monday check-in, Chris. We can plan to prepare something that we send to the commission and get additional input from the commission so that we have a gainful, productive discussion at the end of November.
That's fine.
Okay, great. So Chris and I have a check-in on Monday. So let's just plan to both review the last commission meeting recording, Chris, and then so we have a productive discussion on this subject on the retreat on Monday. And we may go a little bit long. So normally we meet at 2, maybe we'll go till 3:30.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, great. Anything else from the commission on the board retreat?
No, if I come across a name for a local facilitator, I'll let you know, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have 2 names.
Excellent.
I knew you.
Yeah.
Great. So let's move on the agenda to, I believe, new business.
All right, the first thing up is a professional services agreement for Ivoxy. And Kurt, are you going to talk to us about that?
Yes. Morning, Commissioners. Morning, John.
Morning.
This is just a renewal of a PSA with Ivoxy Consulting. Ivoxy is a firm we used in the past, and what we're hiring them, what we'd like to hire them for is for cybersecurity support, IT infrastructure support, and cloud solutions. We have a lot of internal networking and electronics, but we also have a lot of outside facing connections, whether it's for our operators using SCADA, whether it's for Zoom meetings. There's lots of ways to get into our internal network. So our guys are really pretty proactive. And so this is just a renewal of a PSA with a firm we worked for, just to keep our site secure, keep our, we don't want anybody breaking in and making any settings changes or release any ransomware or anything like that. So this is just a support in that vein. So just asking for a request to approve a PSA with Ivoxy Consulting.
I'll make a motion to approve the professional services agreement with Avoxy Consulting.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? There's a motion, a second. Is there any discussion on it? No. Okay, then call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Let's move
Commissioners.
on. I believe
The
there's
second
another-
one
is
we
that-
have. The
Go ahead.
second one we have.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The second one we have is a professional services agreement with Geneva Consulting, and this is our good folks that are over on the Water Resources Board. And what this does is extend it out for a year. So we expect to do this every year, and this is a standard one that I brought to you. And I know Rebecca's around; she can answer questions if you have any. It's a really straightforward agreement. Just look for your approval.
Rebecca, is Becky still doing a great job?
Becky's still doing
Yeah,
a great job.
Becky is doing a great job. I can attest. I'm in all those meetings.
Great. Any conversation, any discussion?
Rebecca's got her hand up.
Oh, okay. Please, Rebecca.
So Mike, could we promote Rebecca to a panelist?
Coming on.
I think she was a panelist.
There she is.
Thank you for letting me just say something briefly. I wanted to just clarify that this PSA is actually, we do a 3-year PSA. Her First Amendment just is expiring at the end of this year. So this Second Amendment to her professional service agreement is for another 3 years, not just 1 year. So you won't see me again until after 2027. And that's all I wanted to make sure that that's what you
Well,
were
I
approving.
hope that's not true.
We want to see you a lot.
Well, we'll see. Okay, I wanted to clarify that it is for a 3-year period. That's how we usually do most of our PSAs. Thank you.
Rebecca.
That's all I need.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further discussion?
So
Good.
Geneva Consulting
go ahead.
essentially is Becky Peterson.
That's right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're never gonna, have we ever done like a competitive solicitation for this work, or has it just been, we're just gonna kind of, the plan is just to kind of keep extending the professional services
We
agreement?
have to ask Rebecca, but I think that when it got started, it was a competitive process
no.
of some kind.
No, it's never been competitive. We can actually hire professional consultants without doing a competitive bid. And she's been part of our PSA group for, oh gosh, way back 2007, maybe even further back than 2017. I have to go look at her earlier PSAs. But she, as you all know, she works it with the entire, she coordinates all the YR1 management board meetings. Like tomorrow, she and I are in 3 together. She's coordinating all 3 of them. And she has worked with us directly. These PSAs are working directly. Typically, if we have a grant, we do not have to go out to RFPs for the outreach and education grant that she's worked on with me. And that's typically where we've also had her help us work with some scoping sometime when we're getting ready to put out RFPs. But this is, this particular professional consulting services does not have to, it's not an engineering where you do, this is a consulting services. So I just want to clarify that again. And she's been working with the PUD for, 15 years now or more. And not specifically always under us, but with us, with a larger group. But this gives us the opportunity if a grant comes up or we need some consulting with her, the PSA is in place. And of course, it'll be a specific task order that we write for her. Right now, she has a small, we have about $20,000 in a on-call budget that's been there. We haven't had to use her for a while. So that money is still there for us if we need it in the future, or if we need to do a new one, with specific tasks, we can do that too. We just want to make sure we have her under contract. So in case we need her, particularly there might be something coming up with the adjudication work or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's Becky received significant funding also, I believe, from Whatcom County as well. Well,
she works under contract with them. Some of the funding comes from the Puget Sound Partnership through the Whatcom Local Integrating Organization, LIO. So some of that work that she does for the Watershed Management Board is funded through that LIO. And some of it is strictly funded from Whatcom County as well.
Would you consider her kind of like Dave Olson in that she's an extension of our team?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion. Yes. She was one of the beginning coordinators when this was all starting back in the late 90s. She's been a part of the whole watershed planning thing from the late 90s straight through as a consultant.
Any further comments, questions?
I'll move with approve amendment number 2, the professional services agreement with you for consulting.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners. As
Motion passed.
I think as all of you know, we had Tracy Irvine. We were really fortunate to have her as an employee for a number of years. And she left. Yesterday was her last day. So prepared a resolution, and Commissioner Grant, I'd ask you to read the resolution, and then I'll ask for the commission's approval.
Okay, so this is resolution number 837. Honoring Tracy Irvine 6 years and 10 months of service as accountant 1. Whereas Tracy Irvine served as accountant 1 for PUD number 1 of Whatcom County from January 2017 to November 2023. And she served the district most capably with the interests of the PUD always foremost, and having given generously of her time and talents in performing the duties of her job. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners do hereby express their sincere appreciation of Tracy Irvine's valued service to the district, and the commissioners extend to her their sincere best wishes for the future. Be it resolved that this resolution be recorded in the permanent records of the district, and that a copy thereof be given to Tracy Irvine. We'll miss you, Tracy. If you're listening from your car, driving across the country.
Well, I will joyfully move that we approve resolution number 837, honoring Tracy Irvine for 6 years of service.
And I will second.
A motion and a second. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed having Tracy be the first face I saw at the PUD and the last face I saw when I left the PUD. And she always made my day a little bit better. So I appreciate that. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. And welcome
Thank you,
Stephanie
commissioners.
too.
Welcome, Stephanie. Yeah. And Stephanie, Chris, is she prepared the presentation we had talked about?
I actually threatened her with that. I hear her laughing out in the lobby right now. I asked her for at least a 20-slide presentation, giving her backstory, and she would come in and give that presentation to us. And she didn't seem to be very positive on that suggestion.
Maybe next meeting.
Okay. Well, great. I think that concludes new business, and I think Brian is ready for the operations report.
Yes. Good morning, all. This is a very busy time of year for operations staff. They're closing out 2023 projects. They're preparing for winter storm operations, and also they're starting to focus their attention on 2024 and the operations, maintenance, and capital projects that they'll be engaged in next year. But over the course of this year, there's been a need to focus increasing attention on water plant number 1. And so one of the things we've done recently is we've commissioned 2 assessments of water treatment plant number 1. One is we've brought in a testing and balancing company to focus on the condition of both our high head water pumps and electric motors, and also our intake pumps and motors. And so they've wrapped that assessment up. We should be getting a complete report on their findings, which I'll be able to talk about in more detail at the next commission meeting. The second thing is that we've commissioned our water engineering firm Consor to do a risk of failure analysis of the components of water treatment plant number 1. We're having increasing problems, frequency of breakdowns of equipment, etc. And we really want to do a sort of a comprehensive look at each component in the process stream for water plant 1. If that process or that piece of equipment failed, what impact does that have on our ability to pump water out to our customers? And we'll go through a sort of a systematic assessment of all the major components in the plant and kind of rank risk and kind of help determine where we should focus our attention first. But that assessment is just getting underway. Here again, I'll be able to report more on that next time, but you're going to hear a lot more about Water Plant 1 as we move into next year, because as you're aware, we have in the 2024 budget and beyond a significant capital expense in terms of upgrading Water Treatment Plant 1. And we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way and we phase it in the right way. And also that we determine funding sources for paying for it. So anyway, stay tuned for that. That's coming up. And other than that, that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Okay, any comments or questions for Brian?
I just have one comment. Brian, the Waputa Water Committee on Thursday the roundtable discussion is about like winter safety. And so if you have any questions or things specifically that you'd like to hear from other PUDs, I know that you all do your continuing education in other places, but if there's anything that you'd like us to be particularly attuned to around that issue, would be happy to ask about it or share anything. But you can just shoot me an email if there's anything specifically that you or the crew might be interested in knowing about how other PUDs deal with things.
Appreciate that, Commissioner.
Okay.
Great. I believe that wraps up then. Thank you, Brian, for the operations report. So let's see, next on our agenda, I believe, is our next public comment, right?
It's the commissioner reports, Commissioner.
Sorry, commissioner reports. All right, so who would like to go first?
Mine's quick. I will be attending the Waputa meetings on Zoom, though. I'm not driving down to the meeting. But so Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I have a board meeting on Friday.
I can, okay. Should I go next? Okay, I can go next. Some of the big things are, I did the Energy Northwest Board of Directors meeting, but since our last meeting, I don't remember what day it was now. And that was good. I think I sent a bunch of notes to Andrew and Chris and Brian about it. I think one of the big things is just that Energy Northwest is continuing to look for funding for the small modular reactor that they're trying to build. And they're planning to ask for a lot of money in the legislative session, like $25 million, I think is kind of the number they've been batting around. They tried to get $10 million from BPA, and BPA said, we're supportive, but we're not really supportive. At least financially, we're not. It's been a very good year financially for BPA is going to be giving customers dividends. And so basically what Joel Cook from BPA said was, you're welcome to give your dividends to Energy Northwest if you'd like to, everybody. And so we'll see how that goes. But I think the real issue that I've seen so far is that some of the PUDs have put some money into what they're calling phase 0, which is these feasibility studies that they're doing around the SMR, but nobody's putting real money on the table in terms of saying, you know, okay, we want a power purchase agreement right now for this project. And, you know, one of the questions I asked is the Ruby Flats project, the big solar project that Energy Northwest was supposed to do, is I think 5 years delayed now. And, you know, they're having trouble interconnecting with BPA. And, you know, they've got reasons for why it's been hard, but I just said, you know, if we're 5 years behind on a utility scale solar project, which is about as easy as it gets, in terms of carbon-free new generation right now. How are we gonna pull off a much harder project, and tell the legislature that we can do it on time and on budget? And their answer was, we don't know. Like, it's gonna be very risky, and it's probably won't do it on time and on budget. So that wasn't an amazingly confidence-inducing response. The other big thing that came out, I don't know if you guys saw it, but on November 9th, Greg Cullen, he's the vice president for Energy Services Development, so the guy at Energy Northwest that's trying to get them to build new resources. The New Scale project, it's a big nuclear project in Utah that's been in development for a long time. They just folded. They announced that they are terminating their small modular reactor project. So I don't know how many millions of dollars is going down the drain with that. So Greg sent a whole press release. I don't know if you got it. But I think that that's a fairly big blow to new SMR development. So, you know, not great news, but I think the reality, and I wanted to share that with both of you, just so that you kind of, because that's the kind of the thing that I'm tracking real
Do you want me
closely.
to give an overview of the UAMPS and their collapse?
I mean, I don't know if
Project is canceled. I saw
What?
press release. The project.
it was terminated. Yeah. I mean, we can forward the whole email with the
Oh,
link
sure,
to the
but I've been
press
involved
release.
with UAMPS for about 7 years.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, in a nutshell, the issue was exactly what you got.
Yeah,
They couldn't say with certainty when the reactors would come online, and they couldn't say with certainty what the price was, but
Right.
it was continuing to get higher and higher. And they were gradually having utilities drop out of the UAMPS coalition because they just couldn't afford it. And there were 18 left in the coalition, started with 30 some. And they just decided it was at the Idaho National Labs was the site of the reactor construction. And everybody just decided this is not going to work for us anymore. And they terminated the whole thing.
Right, so they weren't meeting their subscription requirements. Greg also said that the fact that it was in a state without serious carbon and clean energy requirements could have also contributed. So that's something we have going for us. And then shockingly, transmission was an issue too. So
Well,
kind
that's
of
an issue on any other project.
yeah, exactly. It's going to be a problem for every project, but it does sort of speak to the benefits of potential site locations like Centralia. No, well, yeah, that's not gonna. But you know, places that have existing transmission capacity, like where we're retiring coal plants. And
Now-
you know, I think it also speaks to the need to really continue exploring other sources of baseload carbon-free power like geothermal in earnest. And I think Energy Northwest has this nuclear background, but it shouldn't be the only thing they're focused on. And I agree with you, Atul, that we have to keep looking at things like you know, the older hydrothermal projects definitely did have some, you know, they weren't carbon free. And, you know, looking at seismic activity, you know, there's a reason why these projects take so long to get permits, because you have to look into so much stuff. But I think I'm going to try to continue pushing Energy Northwest to be more involved in looking at geothermal. And Chris and I are presenting Ellen Murphy from the Climate Impacts Advisory Committee asked us to talk a little bit about what we're doing so far on geothermal. So Chris and I are presenting Thursday afternoon to that group. And you know, Representative Alex Rammel and I chatted also with Chris about some legislation that he's looking at in 2024 around like kind of improving the EIS process, the environmental impact statement process around geothermal. And we talked to John about your letter that you wrote. So
What was his comment?
he wants to hear what the Department of Ecology's response is. He wants to hear what their reaction is to the letter, and I think it comes back to just funding is my
Yeah.
impression.
If you had a
Yeah.
conversation with him again, I would urge him not to wait for their formal response
Uh-huh.
in a scoping document, because that you expanding the scope to include this project will be done when they issue their scoping document. So
Okay.
would be best if he went to Dr. Laura Watson's office and had a conversation with
Okay.
Ecology.
Okay. I don't know that he gave us a timeline on it, but for him, I mean, the immediate feedback we got was just. they
If you
need more
wait, if you
funding.
wait for their formal response, it'll be, we're not gonna do it.
Uh-huh.
So he needs to get the political pressure on Watson to try to expand the scope. And if she says no, maybe it's to say, well, will you support the funding next session?
Okay. Okay.
Try to get her committed somehow.
Yeah, okay, okay. And I'm gonna try to zoom into the water committee for Wapuda specifically. And with I'm not getting the agendas anymore, but what's on the agenda for the energy committee for Wapuda, and when we're gonna be hearing anything about the net metering work that's been done. But so that's what's been going on with me and what's up next for me.
Well, at the managers meeting, Nick said that they would have the net metering study, the initial draft out in mid-December.
Oh, okay, okay, good to know.
I am just taking a quick second to look at the Energy Committee agenda. You asked about it. And I'm looking at, here we go. They're going to talk about a little bit about net metering, the Climate Commitment Act, low-income assistance. It is like a typical Nicholas agenda. It's absolutely full of action item. I mean, of presentations. So it's a 2-hour meeting.
Well, I'm interested to see the initial draft of the net metering report, but it sounds like maybe they're gonna give an update on it, but the report's not available till December.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess
I'll probably not go to that one then. I'm just gonna do water.
Okay. So I'm of course attending Wapuda meetings this week. I'm going down there for that. Assuming I'm gonna make sure I get lots of rest in. Hopefully I'm recovered and able to get going. I'll do a test and all that before I go. Anyway, that's the main thing that as far as my meetings. I wanted to talk a little bit about energy and talk a little bit to nuclear and geothermal. So I've taken the opportunity because of what I heard about NuScale a couple weeks ago and attending PPC meetings. It just seems to me that there's a recurring theme that we can learn from. And that is the uncertainty associated with the the process of permitting and building nuclear is why nuclear is so expensive. Because if you look at the levelized costs of delivery in other countries where they have a more predictable process for permitting a new nuclear facility, it's dramatically, the actual cost of the delivered energy is significantly lower. Now, as low as half of what it is here. So, fuel costs the same. And there isn't, it's not like there's not other factors. There is some impact of labor and things like that, but I think it's something to take into consideration. And we should think about that in the context of geothermal, because I think it's fair to say that there's tremendous uncertainty as well in the process of developing geothermal energy, and particularly enhanced geothermal So it's something for us to consider and thinking about how to quantify what is currently not quantifiable for us. Which leads me to an open question to the commission that I don't want us to address today, but something that I want us to ponder. And that is that we did a study, and that study told us something that confirmed, for at least I'm gonna speak for myself, confirmed something that I already knew, that supply is short for our particular part of the state and for the whole state. So we have to come up with more supply. So this to me, we have a whole range of possibilities to explore, and this one possibility of geothermal is getting the bulk of our attention, and that certainly sounds reasonable. But we're looking now at a many-year effort, and I think it's time to do some kind of an investigation or study sanctioned by the commission for the purpose of evaluating which pathways are likely to be the most fruitful for the commission to explore. And not to say that there's also some other pathways that we should be considering, perhaps. And that's an open question on my part. Where are the risks? What are the rewards? And how to at least have maybe one other alternative pathway that we're pursuing? Because I don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. And I'm worried that we might be doing that with geothermal. I don't know. I would like a comment, particularly I've heard from Chris on the subject. I'd like to hear from you, Commissioner Grant, on this subject.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that in a way it feels a little bit like the last 3 years have been a process of doing a feasibility study around energy supply. Certainly it wasn't, commissioned and done, we didn't put an RFP out, but I think that, since I ran for this position, I've been exploring different pathways for developing carbon-free energy at a scale that would make a difference in Whatcom County. And I know you've done the same thing, and we've talked about using micro hydro from our water pipes, and that's not feasible, and it's not at a scale that would make a difference. I think I've really gone on a process myself of trying to figure out, what's the dial that we can turn here that's gonna make a difference. And this is the first thing that has felt feasible, with solar, just with the low capacity factor in Western Washington, it feels challenging to me. I'm open to hearing other ideas, but I would struggle to add, a big line item, or even some sort of a line item in our budget to hire a consultant to do this work, because I don't know that I would trust that the consultant would really come back with anything all that useful in terms of a feasibility study around energy supply. I think if there's another sort of large scale carbon-free source of energy supply that we think could work, then, let's talk about it. But I don't even know what would that be? That was a question back to you, Atul.
Well, okay, so part of my thinking is that when you're undertaking a multi-year program, it's important to provide some traceability that you looked at and had independent input on what a multi-year program on geothermal, how that decision was made. And I don't think we have traceability. So I think it's important to to produce a rationale document, and maybe Chris can pull that together. But I think we need something that the commission can support. That this is our approach, because we looked at this, and this option, and this is the option that seems to pan out the best.
I think that makes plenty of sense to do, you know, and I think in a lot of ways, a lot of that work has been done. And like I said, you know, I wouldn't want to add budget to hire a consultant to do that. But I mean, to me, a big part of what changed for me was realizing that the Department of Natural Resources had received these, you know, millions of dollars from the Department of Energy to do the test wells, which is taking on a significant amount of financial risk to explore feasibility. And so, you know, once I think Chris kind of dug into that a little bit more, that's when it felt like there was this shift in thinking about, oh, this is a large scale. Yeah, it was an opportunity. But I don't know, Chris, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I mean, so we're not a huge organization that has, you know, a power supply staff that we can point at this. So at some point we've got to decide and then move largely investing in one thing. I can pull together a complete look at what all of our options are and the pros and cons of each of them, and get that before you fairly quickly, because that's what I do all day anyway. I mean, that's what I think about constantly. So, you know, I can do that. The issue that I found is that these internally generated reports are never good enough. You always need a third party to come in and take a look and say, yeah, they knew what they were talking about. So, I mean, I can produce the document, but if it just triggers a consultant to check the document, then I say hire the consultant. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, you know, at some point, it's one of these solutions is going to be big enough, and we're not 600, 800, 900 megawatts. We're not a very large utility. Even if we ran all of Whatcom County, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 225 average megawatts, maybe doubling over 30 years. So one large solution would be sufficient to cover all of Whatcom County. So that's kind of the other thing. And these things do operate at scale generally. So you want to go big. But Jamie, you're kind of looking cross-eyed at me.
I'm just a little confused by wanting to put together a document that says we looked at all the things and we chose this. The fact that we're looking into geothermal is commission led, right? You didn't want to do it at first, and the commission led you to pursue geothermal. So it seems a little backwards to now put together a document that says, by the way, this is why. We've had multiple conversations about this over the last 3 months now. I guess I just don't understand. I don't understand.
Can I say one other thing? Is that the very first step in all of this is going to be applying for hopefully some grant funding to do a feasibility study, which might show that it's not feasible.
Right.
I mean, there's so many ways that this project could die. I hate to be so, I'm trying to be the optimist here, but I mean, that's just the reality of it. So the very first step is a feasibility study. That, yeah. I guess I'm wondering who the audience too is for. Yeah, back to sort of Jamie's question of like, yeah, like we're the elected commissioners that kind of speak for the community in terms of setting the policy for the organization. And we make a lot of decisions where we don't have a feasibility study supporting the choices that we make.
Yeah, and I think I've been clear since my time, my entire time as commissioner. I'd like to have a little bit more traceability to important decisions that we make. and we have discussed, what we've discussed in the commission regarding geothermal is that, hey, this is something worth looking into.
Mhm.
There's a big difference between, hey, this is something worth looking into, and then, hey, this is something that now we're getting ourselves pregnant with and then more money comes after more money after comes after more money. So we have to recognize the fact that we're starting something that will start to have inertia. At some point in the PUD's history, the PUD started getting involved, leaving the window of industrial water and started working on countywide water policy.
Mhm.
If you can think about that, for example, that process is one that was this kind of the same kind of approach of completely internally developed pathway. And I think it's even better if those kinds of important departures away from prior practice are justified and documented so that other people have the benefit of understanding why we're on this path. That's what is I believe is an organization's responsibility as it relates to transparency and open government.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we're on the same page, and I think we've been pretty transparent about it. And it's also part of our strategic plan is to undertake a demonstration project of the use of alternative clean and renewable energy technologies. So I think we're really just trying to push that strategy forward. But Chris, I mean, I think if you want to throw onto paper some of the different options available to us in the county and sort of the megawatts of potential carbon-free energy generation from each one, and sort of the feasibility and why this is the one that we're kind of putting more staff and commission resources towards, then I mean, if is that useful to you at all?
Yeah, that would be useful, but like you challenged with the question, right? What else can we look at? And you made the comment about solar. And we are getting an 8-year payback on our capital investment on the infrastructure being installed that's been installed at the PUD. So even with the low insolation in our community, because of our different weather patterns, we are getting a return. I remind you that tier 2 is going to be approximately, and I'm saying very approximately, twice tier 1. I'm also clarifying that the nature of that tier 2 power is similar, that it's a block structure from my understanding. So for example, we could install additional solar up to the additional tier 2 electricity we'd be purchasing. And if we're able to get an 8-year payback on tier 1, well, how fast would our payback be on tier 2? So these are just questions I'm curious about. They need to
Actually,
be,
that 8-year payback was calculated on tier 2 power.
it was based on an assumption that we'd be offsetting tier 2 power.
That's correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you, Chris. And so it's possible that additional installation would also have that kind of payback. Obviously, it would have to be done at a scale, a bigger scale. So these are the kinds of things that I think I'm curious about. And to have some kind of a reference point of information on this pathway, why this is such an attractive pathway in relation to the other pathways that we're looking at, would be helpful for me to be able to both answer questions from the community, as well as help me think about, well, what do we have to compete with if we're going to find something better? So some goals, some targets, that kind of thing. So yes, it would be helpful. I think we need to do more to document the basis of this decision. As an engineer, I need to see numbers, and I need to see numbers justifying the choices we're making. This was, of course, a branch off of the commissioner reports. I'm done with my commissioner report.
Next up is public comment. Rick, would you like to say something?
Not falling over here. As a follow on to John's comments around adjudication and metering wells, I would, as I understand it, the Department of Ecology currently has the statutory authority to require any exempt well to report the quantity of water that it uses. Obviously, ecology has some overriding, perhaps political reasons for it, wanting to avoid a storm, but they're also not exactly known for being reticent about exercising whatever statutory authority they have. And they have, they're saying they're not going to require metering and reporting, and yet they have the authority to do so. So I'm thinking, as John did, that it's coming. One of the things that you might consider advocating for in the ongoing process is for state funding to provide water meters. There's amongst people who are on wells, there is a big reluctance to reporting. They basically don't want the state in there collecting data from them. Perhaps being able to provide the meters would help alleviate some of that, make it more or less bad for them from their viewpoint. But anyway, something that you might consider going forward and in the process.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Rick. Any other comments? Okay, I'll close the
See any online?
close the public comment period. We have, I believe, nothing else on our agenda. There's no executive session planned, and I guess I'll call now for any other items for the good of the order. No, okay, well, thank you all for coming. I'll go ahead and conclude this Whatcom PUD regular meeting. And our next meeting is on November 28th. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Feel better.
Yeah, I'm good. I just didn't want to cough all over everybody.
You might be